Have you ever noticed how exhausting it is to fight a battle that is not actually happening? What if the most draining conflicts in your life are the ones taking place entirely inside your own mind? If you have ever found yourself staring at the ceiling in the quiet hours of the night, or standing in the shower rehearsing a conversation that may never occur, this is for you. We build entire worlds in our heads. We construct the defense, we anticipate the attack, and we craft the perfect response. We imagine the anger, the misunderstanding, the harsh words. We feel the tension rising in our shoulders, the clenching of our jaw, the accelerated beating of our hearts. We are preparing. We tell ourselves that if we can just figure out every possible outcome, we will not be caught off guard. We believe this endless mental rehearsal will somehow protect us from being hurt. But here is the truth. It is not protecting you. It is only stealing your peace. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that the mind can be a master of illusion. When we are not firmly grounded in the present moment, the mind wanders into the unknown future, building heavy fortresses out of fears and shadows. One of the deepest lessons of Buddhism is that much of our suffering is not caused by reality itself. It is caused by our attachment to a reality we cannot control. By constantly playing out worst-case scenarios, we suffer the pain of an argument before a single word is even spoken. We suffer it 100 times over, entirely alone. Imagine a person standing in a quiet, empty room. Suddenly, they begin swinging their fists at the air, blocking invisible punches, dodging unseen attacks. They are exhausting their body, breathing heavily, entirely consumed by the fight. If you watched this person from the outside, you would think they were fighting for their life. But there is no opponent. They are fighting a ghost. The energy spent is completely real. The exhaustion is deep and heavy, but the enemy is simply not there. This is exactly what we do when we carry around unspoken arguments. We go about our day, we commute to work, we sit down to dinner with our families, we try to close our eyes and rest. But internally, we are swinging at the air. We are defending our self-worth, our choices, and our boundaries against someone who is miles away, or perhaps someone who does not even intend to fight. We let the heavy ghosts of what might happen shatter the stillness of what is happening. We trade a quiet, peaceful morning for a bitter war that only exists in our thoughts. Ask yourself, who are you fighting in your mind right now? What imaginary conversation is sitting heavy on your chest today? Is this mental rehearsal actually bringing you peace, or is it just feeding your exhaustion? Stop, breathe. Notice where you are right now. Observe the thought without following it into the dark. You are safe in this exact moment. You do not need to defend yourself right now. Drop your invisible armor. Let the ghost fade back into the empty air. You do not have to have all the answers ready for a moment that has not yet arrived. Peace is not found in being perfectly prepared for a fight. It is found in realizing you do not have to fight at all right now. But laying down your armor is only the first step. To truly let go, we must look deeper. Why do we feel this desperate need to know exactly how everything will play out? And this is where the next truth begins, because beneath every rehearsed argument is a fear waiting to be understood. 2. Why we demand answers from the unknown. What if the desperate need for certainty is the very thing creating your anxiety? We live under a heavy illusion. We believe that if we can just figure out what will happen next, we will finally feel safe. We treat the future like an interrogation, demanding that it speaks to us before it is ready. We want to know exactly how someone will react when we finally speak our truth. We want to know if they will understand, if they will apologize, or if they will simply walk away. We demand answers from a moment that has not yet been written. We convince ourselves that ambiguity is dangerous, so we overthink. We analyze past conversations. We try to force clarity into spaces where there is only fog. In Buddhist thought, this desperate grasp for certainty is a deep form of attachment. It teaches us that much of our inner turmoil comes from refusing to accept the present moment exactly as it is unresolved. Buddhism reminds us of the truth of impermanence. Life is fluid, constantly shifting, and largely outside of our direct control. When we demand that the unknown hand us a definitive answer today, we are fighting the very nature of existence. Imagine standing at the edge of a deep, fast-moving river. You reach in, trying to grab a handful of water, attempting to hold it perfectly still in your palms. But the harder you squeeze your fingers together, the faster the water slips through. You cannot force a river to freeze just because you want to examine it. The more you struggle to hold it, the more exhausted you become. The river simply remains a river, flowing on its own time. Think about your own life. How often do you demand that a situation resolve itself on your timeline? Perhaps you are waiting for a difficult conversation with a colleague. Maybe you are wondering if someone you love is still angry with you, or you are trying to predict how a complex family conflict will unfold. You check your phone. You replay their last words. You refuse to let your mind rest. Because a restless mind feels like a productive mind. We trick ourselves into believing that worrying is a form of work. We feel that if we simply let the situation sit unresolved, we are being careless. But worrying does not speed up the answers. It only drains your strength for when the answers finally arrive. Ask yourself, what are you trying to force right now? What situation are you holding on to so tightly, hoping it will drop a perfect resolution into your hands? What are you afraid will happen if you simply let it remain unknown for one more night? Pause, breathe. You do not have to solve the entire puzzle today. Give yourself permission to step back. Let the unknown be unknown. When the mind races forward demanding answers, gently pull it back. Do your part in the present, then release the outcome. Let the water flow through your hands without trying to trap it. Peace is not found in having all the answers lined up perfectly in a row. Peace is found in learning to sit comfortably in the quiet space where the answers have not yet arrived. But when we refuse to sit in that space, the mind rebels. It begins to construct artificial scenarios to give us a false sense of control. And this leads us to the next profound realization. 3. The illusion of mental preparation. What if your mind is lying to you about what keeps you safe? Here is the truth few people want to face. We believe that by rehearsing a conflict, we are protecting ourselves from it. We think that if we write the script, memorize our lines, and anticipate every cruel thing another person might say, we will not be caught off guard. We treat our own imagination like a training ground for survival. When we do this, the physical toll is incredibly real. Your heart beats faster. Your hands clench. You feel genuine anger towards someone who is not even in the room. You are punishing your own body today for an event that might only ever exist tomorrow. Buddhism reminds us that this is the deep trap of the restless mind. The mind desperately seeks certainty and control, and when it cannot find them in reality, it creates a simulation. But this simulation is not harmless. Buddhist wisdom teaches that we do not just experience the world, we experience the world our mind creates. When you sit in silence and vividly imagine a bitter argument, your mind and body experience that suffering as real. You are choosing to walk through the fire before a single spark has even been lit. Imagine walking through a quiet, sunlit forest. The air is cool, the birds are singing, and the path ahead is entirely clear. But instead of walking freely, you are carrying a massive, heavy iron shield. Your arms are trembling, your shoulders ache, and your vision is blocked by the cold, heavy metal in front of your face. You are terrified that at any moment a storm of arrows will fall from the sky. But look around. There are no enemies. There is only the wind in the trees. You are exhausting yourself preparing for a battle in a place of perfect peace. You are carrying the weight of a war that is not happening. Think about your own life. How often do you carry this heavy iron shield into your quietest moments? Perhaps it happens when you are driving home in silence, and your mind suddenly scripts a heated confrontation with someone who dismissed you. Maybe it happens when you are finally lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, and you begin defending your worth to someone who has not even spoken to you in weeks. You sacrifice your own rest in order to stand guard. You trade the peace of the present moment for the exhausting illusion of being prepared. Ask yourself, has rehearsing an argument ever truly made the real conversation peaceful, or does it just guarantee that you suffer twice, once alone in your mind and once in reality? Is this thought bringing you peace or feeding your fear? Stop. Breathe. Notice the heavy weight of the shield you are holding. You do not need it right now. Let the feeling rise without making it your identity. You do not have to follow the thought down the dark path of endless scenarios. You do not need a perfect defense for an attack that only exists in your imagination. Because true strength is not about being perfectly defended against every possible harm. It is about trusting yourself to handle the moment gently if and when it actually arrives. But to stop fighting these ghosts, you must first learn how to step back and observe the mind at work. And this is where the next truth begins. 4. The Buddhist art of observing the mind. What if you could watch your most anxious thoughts walk right past you without ever inviting them inside? Most people do not realize that we have a choice in how we react to our own minds. We assume that because a thought enters our head, it requires our immediate attention. If a memory of someone who wronged us surfaces, we instantly dive into it. If a sudden fear of a future conflict flashes behind our eyes, we grab onto it, holding it tight, analyzing every possible angle. We become completely entangled in the noise. We treat every passing thought, every imaginary argument, as an absolute emergency that must be solved right now. But Buddhism reminds us of a quiet, profound freedom. You are not your thoughts. You are the space in which your thoughts happen. Buddhist wisdom teaches the practice of mindfulness, not as a way to force the mind to be entirely empty, but as a way to watch the mind without being controlled by it. When we practice non-attachment to our own thoughts, we begin to realize that the mind is simply producing ideas, fears, and memories. We do not have to believe every story it tells us. We do not have to participate in every argument it tries to start. Imagine sitting quietly on the grassy bank of a wide, gently moving river. Every few moments, a leaf falls from a branch above and lands on the surface of the water, floating effortlessly downstream. You can sit there peacefully, simply watching the leaves drift out of sight. But what if you jumped into the freezing water every time a leaf fell, desperately trying to catch it, hold it, and inspect it? You would be shivering, exhausted, and constantly fighting the heavy current. The leaves are your thoughts. The river is your mind. You do not have to jump in. You can choose to just sit on the bank and watch them float by. Think about your own life. When the thought of a future confrontation suddenly appears while you are washing the dishes or sitting quietly at your desk, what do? Do you jump into the freezing river? Do you start drafting your verbal responses, letting the familiar anger rise in your chest? Or can you simply notice the thought, there is my mind, preparing for a fight again, and let it drift away on the current? We exhaust ourselves because we try to catch every anxious thought and wrestle it to the ground. We forget that we are allowed to just let it pass. Ask yourself, what would happen if you simply refused to jump into the current of your own overthinking today? What if you let the thought exist without letting it take over your reality? Pause. Breathe. Observe the thought without following it. When the urge to rehearse a conflict rises, do not fight it. Fighting a thought only creates more noise. Instead, gently step back, acknowledge it, then simply refuse to engage. Let the feeling rise and fall without making it your identity. You do not have to sit at the table with every thought that pulls up a chair. But choosing not to engage with our anxious thoughts requires something even harder. It requires us to release our grip on something we desperately want to say. And this is where the next truth begins. 5. Dropping the weight of unspoken words. There is a strange kind of freedom in realizing you do not need the last word to find peace. What if the sentences you are so desperately holding on to are the very things keeping you trapped? Here is the truth few people want to face. We hoard unspoken words like heavy treasure. We draft them quietly in our minds, polishing the perfect comeback, the ultimate explanation, the undeniable proof that we were right and they were wrong. We carry these words heavily in our chests. We convince ourselves that if we can just find the perfect moment to deliver them, the other person will finally understand. They will finally apologize, and the pain will instantly dissolve. But carrying the weight of what you wish you could say is an agonizing, lonely burden. In Buddhist thought, this desperate need to explain, to justify, and to prove our own righteousness is deeply tied to the ego's attachment to validation. Buddhism reminds us that clinging to our side of the story and demanding that someone else acknowledge it only deepens our suffering. It is an attempt to control the mind and heart of another person. But you cannot force anyone to hear what they are not ready to understand. Imagine you are walking down a long, quiet road, carrying a heavy, sharp stone in your hand. Every day, you carve another word into it, all your hurt, all your anger, all your unspoken truths. You hold it tightly in your clenched fist, waiting for the day you can finally hand it to the person who caused your pain. But days turn into months. The sharp edges of the stone cut deeply into your palm. Your hand aches, your arm grows tired, and your entire body is weighed down. The other person is miles away, completely unaware. You are the only one feeling the sharp edge of the stone. You are the only one bleeding. Think about your own life. How many sharp stones are you still carrying right now? Perhaps it is a final, harsh truth you desperately want to deliver to someone who walked away. Maybe it is a quiet defense you want to speak to a critical family member, or a justification you want to hand to someone who constantly misunderstands you. You replay the fantasy of finally speaking your mind, hoping it will bring closure. But instead, the words just circle violently in your head, keeping you awake, keeping you tied down, keeping you at war. Ask yourself, who are you still trying to convince? Are these unspoken words actually serving your healing, or are they simply keeping the wound open? What would you lose if you simply stopped waiting for the perfect moment to say them? Pause. Breathe. Look at your clenched hand. You do not have to throw the stone. You simply have to let it drop. You do not need to deliver the perfect explanation to someone committed to misunderstanding you. Your peace does not require their validation. Let the unspoken words drift away into the wind. You do not need them to understand your pain in order for you to heal from it. But dropping the words is only part of the journey. When you finally stop trying to speak, a deep silence is left behind. And sometimes that silence feels entirely unresolved. And this is where the next truth begins. 6. Making peace with the unanswered. What if the hardest lesson in life is not learning how to fight, but learning how to sit peacefully in a room where nothing has been resolved? Most of us are terrified of loose ends. We want the difficult conversation to finish clearly. We want the apology to be spoken aloud. We want the fading relationship to have a definitive, unmistakable ending. When a situation is left open, quiet, or ambiguous, our minds begin to spin violently. We rush to fill the empty space with rehearsed arguments, heavy assumptions, and hypothetical conclusions. We do this because, to the restless mind, a painful ending often feels much safer than no ending at all. We would rather fight a war in our heads than sit in the quiet ache of uncertainty. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that this desperate need for closure is a profound source of suffering. We suffer because we demand finality from a world that is inherently fluid and unpredictable. In Buddhist thought, true acceptance does not mean approving of how a situation was left. It simply means acknowledging that the present moment is exactly as it is, unanswered. It is the deep realization that you cannot force reality to neatly tie itself into a perfect bow just because you are uncomfortable with the frayed edges. Imagine a heavy, dark cloud rolling into a previously clear sky. It sits there, thick and gray, blocking the warmth of the sun. You stand on the ground below, shouting up at the sky, demanding that the cloud either pour its rain or immediately leave. You throw rocks into the empty air. You pace back and forth, exhausting yourself, insisting that the weather make up its mind. But the sky does not answer you. The cloud simply hangs there, moving entirely on the wind's invisible, silent timeline. The more you shout, the more drained you become. But if you simply sit down, breathe, and stop fighting the sky, eventually the wind will shift on its own. Think about your own life. How much of your daily energy is spent yelling at the clouds? Perhaps someone walked out of your life without offering a proper goodbye. Maybe a deep conflict was swept under the rug, leaving a heavy, awkward silence in its wake. Instead of letting the silence simply be silence, you constantly replay the past events in your mind. You build fierce arguments. You demand an explanation from someone who is not even there. You refuse to let the story end on a quiet question mark. So you keep writing exhausting new chapters in your head. Ask yourself, are you waiting for a resolution that may never arrive? What would happen if you simply accepted the silence as the final answer? Is your demand for closure keeping you trapped in the very pain you want to escape? Pause. Breathe. Let the unwritten pages remain blank for now. Stop trying to force the door open when it is currently standing closed. You do not need the final piece of the puzzle to move forward. You are allowed to walk away from a table where the conversation was never finished. Because closure is not a magical gift that someone else finally hands to you. Closure is your own quiet decision to stop asking the question. But to stop asking, we must learn how to soften our grip on the situation entirely, changing how we hold our expectations. And this is where the next truth begins. 7. The power of gentle detachment. What if letting go does not mean you stop caring, but simply means you stop trying to control? Here is the truth few people want to face. We often confuse detachment with coldness. We convince ourselves that if we stop rehearsing the argument, if we stop overthinking the conflict, it means we are giving up. We believe that if we drop our mental defenses, we are letting the other person win. We hold on to our anxiety tightly because we believe this tight grip is proof of our strength, our boundaries, or our commitment to being right. So we keep gripping the situation even as it tears us apart. In Buddhist thought, detachment or non-attachment is deeply misunderstood. It is not about building walls, shutting people out, or becoming entirely numb to the world. Buddhism teaches that true non-attachment is actually the highest form of peace. It is the practice of engaging with the world fully, but refusing to tie your inner stillness to external outcomes. It is the profound realization that you can care deeply about a situation without needing to force its result. Imagine you are holding onto a thick, heavy rope. On the other end of the rope is an unresolved conflict, an anticipated argument, or a silent feud. The situation is slowly pulling away from you. slipping into the unknown. Because you desperately want to fix it, because you want to control how it ends, you grip the rope as tightly as you can. But the harder you hold on, the deeper the rough fibers burn into your hands. Your palms are raw, your arms are shaking, you are completely exhausted. You believe that holding on is a sign of resilience. You think if you just pull hard enough, you can force the situation back to where you want it. But the real strength is not in the pulling. The real strength is simply opening your fingers and letting the rope drop to the ground. Think about your own life. How tightly are you gripping the rope right now? Perhaps it is a tense dynamic at work that you cannot stop overanalyzing. Maybe it is a misunderstanding with a friend, and you are constantly drafting paragraphs in your mind to defend your character. You keep tightening your grip, bracing for an impact that has not happened yet. You believe that if you just hold on to the anxiety hard enough, you will somehow manage the outcome. But your tight grip is only exhausting you. It is burning your hands. And it changes absolutely nothing about what the other person will do. Ask yourself, are you holding on to this conflict because it is actually bringing you clarity, or because you are terrified of the empty space that will be left if you let go? What if you simply opened your hands today? Pause, breathe, feel the tension in your own body. Notice how tightly your jaw is clenched. Notice the heavy weight in your shoulders. Now, imagine opening your hands. You do not have to figure it out today. Let the situation breathe. Do your part in the present moment. Then release the outcome. You do not have to abandon yourself to practice detachment. You only have to abandon the heavy illusion of control. Because when you stop exhausting yourself trying to manage every possible outcome, you finally discover something entirely different. And this is where the next truth begins. Because beneath all the fighting, what you are truly searching for is permission to lay down your armor. 8. Choosing rest over resolution. What if the most courageous thing you can do is simply close your eyes while the storm is still raging outside? Here is the truth we often forget. We have been conditioned to believe that rest is a reward for resolution. We tell ourselves, I will finally relax when this situation is sorted out. I will sleep peacefully as soon as I know exactly where we stand. We tie our basic human need for stillness directly to the actions of other people. When a conflict is looming or a conversation is left unfinished, we stay awake, pacing the hollow halls of our own minds. We convince ourselves that resting while things are messy is a sign of weakness, carelessness, or defeat. But Buddhist wisdom offers a deeply different perspective. It teaches us that if we only allow ourselves to experience peace when all external conditions are perfectly resolved, we will never know peace at all. The external world is inherently restless, unpredictable, and endlessly shifting. In Buddhism, true mindfulness is not about waiting for the world to stop spinning so you can finally step off. It is about finding a quiet center inside yourself while the world continues to spin. It is the profound realization that your right to rest is not dependent on the world being perfectly organized. Imagine a small wooden boat navigating a vast, dark ocean. The wind is howling, and the waves are rough and unpredictable. The sailor is running frantically across the deck, desperately trying to beat the waves down with a small wooden paddle. They are soaked, freezing, and completely exhausted, believing that if they just fight the water hard enough, they can force the ocean to become flat and calm. But the ocean will only calm when it is ready. The wise sailor knows when it is time to tie down the sails. Step down into the quiet, warm cabin beneath the deck, light a small candle, and simply sleep. The storm may still be raging outside, but the sailor knows they cannot control it. They must rest if they want to survive the journey. Think about your own life. How often are you standing on the deck in the middle of the night, swinging a paddle at the ocean? Perhaps you are lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, obsessing over a passive-aggressive remark from a coworker. Maybe you are staring at a blank phone screen, waiting for an apology that is not coming, running through a dozen different imaginary arguments. You think that staying awake and worrying is somehow keeping the boat afloat. You believe that sacrificing your peace is the price you must pay to stay prepared. Ask yourself, has sacrificing your rest ever actually solved the conflict? Has playing an argument out for the 100th time ever changed the other person's mind? What would happen if you simply decided that your peace of mind is more important than having the final answer today? Pause. Breathe. Step down into the quiet cabin of your own mind. Give yourself permission to put the argument down. You can always pick it back up tomorrow if you truly need to, but for right now, you are allowed to rest. You do not need to solve the unresolvable tonight. Let the heavy thoughts remain on the deck while you find the warmth of the candle inside. Because true peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the quiet, powerful decision to choose your own well-being over the chaos of the unknown. And when you finally make the radical choice to rest, you discover the ultimate destination of this journey. And this is where the final truth begins. 9. The freedom of returning to the present. What if the ghost you have been fighting all this time was never really there at all? Think back to where we started on this journey. The quiet, dark hours of the night. The arguments rehearsed in the empty spaces of your day. The racing heart, the clenched jaw, the heavy exhaustion of defending yourself against someone who is miles away. We build these towering mental fortresses of words, justifications, and anxiety because we believe they will keep us safe. We believe that if we can just anticipate every possible pain, we can prevent it from touching us. But the fortress is an illusion, and the only thing it truly traps inside is you. Buddhist wisdom teaches us that the highest form of freedom is simply arriving exactly where you are. You do not have to live in the shadows of what might happen tomorrow. You do not have to carry the sharp, heavy stones of unspoken words, waiting for a moment of closure that may never come. When you stop demanding answers from the unknown, when you stop trying to force the river to freeze in your hands and the storm clouds to part on your command, you suddenly realize how much lighter you feel. Imagine stepping out of that quiet, empty room where you were swinging your fists at the air. You finally unbuckle the heavy iron shield you have been carrying for so long, and it drops to the floor with a loud, metallic echo. You step outside. You feel the cool, gentle breeze on your face for the first time. The deep, aching exhaustion in your shoulders begins to melt away. The river is flowing gently on its own path. The sky is holding its clouds without demanding they rain. You look around and you realize that right here, right now, in this exact second, there is no conflict, there is no argument, there is no one to fight. There is only you, the breath in your lungs, and the quiet space you have finally allowed yourself to inhabit. This is what happens when you choose your own rest over the desperate need for a resolution. You begin to profoundly trust yourself. You realize that true self-respect is not about having the perfect comeback ready for a fight. True self-respect is protecting your own inner peace. It is knowing that if a difficult conversation does happen tomorrow, you will have the clarity and strength to handle it then. You do not need to borrow tomorrow's trouble to prove your resilience today. By releasing your grip on the heavy rope, by letting the ghosts fade back into the empty wind, you are not giving up. You are simply taking your life back. Ask yourself, what will you do with all the energy you reclaim when you finally stop fighting these invisible battles? Imagine the deep, profound peace of lying down tonight, not to draft a defense, but simply to sleep. Peace was never waiting for you in the perfect apology, the final word, or the ultimate resolution. Peace was always right here, waiting for you to stop fighting, stop clinging, and simply breathe. If these lessons touched your heart, share this video with someone who may need a little more peace today. You can let go now.